talking about serious questions is a pleasure. It is perhaps the greatest mere pleasure known to man.
Wrong chair, wrong set. This is the right chair, and this is the right set. Because it's time once again for Ask Mr. Chesterton. Okay, here we are. We've got our Chesterton coffee mug there. I've got my clipboard, and we're ready to go with Ask Mr. Chesterton. Now, even though we've done this before, there are still some people who can't figure out how we do it. Well, we start with G.K. Chesterton. There he is, right there. In there, he's sitting on his park bench in London in 1930 or so. And then we've got us, here and now, or thereabouts. People want to know how Chesterton can answer a question that we ask here today from way back there on his park bench over 80 years ago. Well, it's simple. We ask a lot of questions today only because we don't know that somebody has already answered them long ago, even before we were born. Truth doesn't change. Chesterton's words are as true now as when he first spoke them and wrote them. These really are his words that we will be hearing. They just happen to be the right answers to the questions that we ask. So, we'll have questions today from our studio audience, from your phone calls and your emails. So, let's get started. I see we have several members of our studio audience waiting to ask Mr. Chesterton a question. Just get in line there behind the microphone. That's good. You're first, sir. Just speak into the microphone. What is your question for Mr. Chesterton?
Yeah. What do you think of Grimm's Law?
Of what?
Grimm's Law?
Grimm's Law.
Yeah.
Our first question, Mr. Chesterton, is what do you think of Grimm's Law?
If there is such a thing as Grimm's Law, I would break it if I knew what it was.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Another question from the audience. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I watched all the other shows in this most recent series, and there was this one episode about life and death. I don't really get it. I mean, I don't actually think there was anything to get. I mean, in spite of whatever you were trying to say, the fact is simple. Life is hard, death is easy.
Easy, without being pleasant.
Okay, but since you can't really explain life, you just talk about death. I mean, that basically sums up Catholic theology, right? Religion is pretty much a cop-out, isn't it? Catholic apologetics is just the apologetics of death. That's all a Catholic theologian can talk about.
Why? Because he proclaims life everlasting? When a man has found something which he prefers to life, he then, for the first time, begins to live.
Yeah, just wait a minute, okay? That actually brings up one of the other episodes in the series, the one about comedy and tragedy. This sort of it ties right in. So, it seems to me that the desire for immortality is the human tragedy. The desire to be loved is the human comedy.
Both are the divine comedy.
Oh, good. You brought up Dante. That reminds me. Just wait a minute.
Excuse me.
Yeah. So Dante, right? So that reminds me. He's always trotted out as being so great. I mean, I don't see what was so great about him. He was just another imperialist. No one ever talks about that. And as far as I can tell, you're not really that into imperialism.
The only theory of imperialism that seems to me to be sound is Dante's. He defended the Roman Empire as the best human government, on the definite ground that the best human government would probably crucify God. Caesar had to be lawful, because Christ had to be killed by law.
Okay, that's clever. But since you brought that up, just a minute, okay? So since you brought that up,
Excuse me, we need
yeah,
to
okay,
let
this will
someone
just
else
take a
ask
second,
a
okay?
question. Perhaps could you
One of
be-
the other shows in the series was about faith and doubt, and it seems to me that faith is just emotional, whereas doubt, if I may say so, is the prerogative of the intellect, right?
The mind exists not to doubt, but to decide.
Okay, that's good, but that reminds me. Okay, just hold on, okay? You had that other episode.
Hey, you
where
have
yeah,
to
okay,
let-
just one more thing because it's really all tied together. Okay, there was this one episode on Catholic social teaching. Not really sure what the point of it was, or even if there was a point. But anyway, it seems to prove there's actually a difference between theology and religion. And when the churches are run by theologians, religious people stay away.
Theology is simply that part of religion that requires brains.
Okay, yeah, I thought you were going to say something like that, but there was another episode where...
Okay, that's it. You're done. Step aside,
okay.
please. Just let the next gentleman ask a question.
Yes.
Go ahead, sir. Do you have a question?
Yes. Mr. Chesterton.
Excuse me. You'll just have to wait just a moment. We have our first phone call here. Hello. You're on Ask Mr. Chesterton. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Virginia.
Okay. Go ahead.
I've watched all the shows in the most recent series, and there was one show on the environment, and it seems to me you never explain exactly what you consider to be the right relationship with the natural world. In fact, you really didn't explain anything. I mean, the whole thing was pretty much a cop-out, you know, if you ask my opinion. And I gotta go.
Would everyone in the audience kindly turn off their cell phones? Mr. Chesterton, the question, I believe, is about our proper relationship with the environment.
The whole art of life is to stand rightly with one's surroundings, and it cannot be denied that mere civilization, mere accumulation of knowledge and convenience, can sometimes put men so utterly wrong with their surroundings that the only logical outcome of all their culture is some frantic and dehumanized suicide or lunacy.
Very good. Now, sir, what is your question for Mr. Chesterton?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chesterton.
Just a moment. I'm sorry. Our first email has just come in. Here's the email. Dear Mr. Chesterton, I've watched all the shows in the most recent series, and I noticed that there was a show about Nietzsche. Look, he spelled Nietzsche wrong. And I'll admit that you did a pretty good job of making Nietzsche look stupid. Look, he spelled Nietzsche wrong again. But in spite of that, I think you have to admit that Nietzsche, look at that, 3 times he spells it differently and each one of them's wrong, that Nietzsche made a lot of good points in his time, and he pointed out how a lot of our ideas about God and morality and all that are preposterous. Nancy in L.A. Wait, just a minute. Over there. Hello, Nancy in L.A. Mr. Chesterton, I think the question was something about Nietzsche exposing how God and morality are preposterous.
Nietzsche is himself more preposterous than anything he denounces.
Now we'll let someone else ask a question. Go ahead, sir, please.
Mr. Chesterton, you seem to be pretty good with sharp distinctions. What is the difference between wit and humor?
Wit is always connected with the idea that truth is close and clear. Humor, on the other hand, is always connected with the idea that truth is tricky and mystical and easily mistaken. Wit is as abstract as algebra. It is a logical weapon very valuable to truth. But humor depends on human beings, and therefore on special, separate human beings. Therefore, wit is international, while humor is national.
I see. Then what is the difference between wit and mirth?
A man's wit overpowers his enemies, but his mirth overpowers him.
I see. Then what is the difference between wit and wisdom?
A man can pretend to be wise, but a man cannot pretend to be witty.
I see. Then what's the
Okay,
difference?
that's enough. Do you remember what happened to the last guy who asked too many questions? Seems like none of you have figured out that brevity is the soul of wit.
Somebody once said that brevity is the soul of wit, when he obviously meant to say that wit is the soul of brevity. It is obvious that the brevity is only the body, while the wit is the spirit. In mere brevity, as in the statement, "Cats eat rats," when left to itself, seems still to await some awakening visit of the divine fire. I do not say that brevity is the soul of wisdom, as it is said to be of wit, but I do say that it is much easier for folly to pretend to be wisdom when it is not put to the brisk test of brevity.
We have another phone call. Hello, you're on Ask Mr. Chesterton. Where are you from?
Euclid, Minnesota.
Where's that?
Minnesota.
I meant what it's near. Never mind. What's your question for Mr. Chesterton?
Mr. Chesterton, there are many intelligent atheists today. How would you deal with them?
There are intelligent atheists, but the stupid sort are much commoner and much nicer. I shouldn't wonder if heaven is largely populated with atheists of that sort, scratching their heads and wondering where they are. If there were no God, there would be no atheists.
I like that one. You have to think about it for a second there. Okay, here's an email. Dear Mr. Chesterton, what do you think about the movement to legalize same-sex marriage? How can we really forbid it? After all, shouldn't we appreciate the fact that it's beautiful when two people love each other? Tony in San Francisco.
We have no particular reason to suppose that a lily was intended to be beautiful. It was intended for the far nobler purpose of producing other lilies. Marriage is a fact, an actual human relation, like that of motherhood, which has certain habits and loyalties, except for a few monstrous cases where it is turned to torture by insanity or sin. Though a proper Noah's Ark should contain 2 specimens of every animal, nobody ever proposed that it should contain 2 Noahs. People who hold these views are not a minority, but a monstrosity. It is simply another example of the modern and morbid weakness to sacrifice the normal to the abnormal.
Okay, we have another question from the audience. Go ahead, please. What's the matter?
Yes, I have a question, but I'm not so sure that that last answer was exactly right. You see, I think this is one example of where Mr. Chesterton is not quite up to date.
To be up to date is a paltry ambition, except in an almanac.
But don't you see what you're doing? You are imposing your morals on someone else, and that's not good. And why can't you just let people be happy by letting them do what they want?
For the simple reason that if the solution of human sorrow were as simple as that, human beings would have found it long ago. If a man could be instantly happy merely by doing as he likes, he would never have gone on so long doing as he dislikes. If paradise actually lay along the line of least resistance, how could we have missed it? So many pagan peoples have worshipped nature, and so many communal communities have returned to nature, and yet all of the sensible ones have returned to civilization.
Well, let's not be so quick to dismiss the pagans, you see. Paganism is good. I support all religions coexist, you see. Paganism represents a more universal and unitarian sort of faith without such a narrow emphasis on morality, a much more natural sense of worship. It's broader. We don't want the narrow way. We want the broad way. That's the sort of religion we really need.
There are those who tell us that we must broaden our ideas, by which they mean disembody them, in order to make a universal religion. They tell us that particular rituals, or forms, or holy places will cut us off from our fellow creatures of all climates and colors, and that these must be replaced by abstractions. But the truth, it seems to me, is flatly the other way. It is only by these particular signals and symbolic gestures that the race of men as a whole does, and always did, recognize a religion. If all the pagans who ever worshipped strange gods had strayed into your modern Unitarian chapel, their very first words would be, but where is your altar?
I think it is important to understand that we don't all have the same religion, and that's okay. In fact, when it comes right down to it, no two men have exactly the same religion.
But the same religion can have both of the men.
Did you have a question?
Well, yes, I do have a question. My question is about the doctrine of the fall. How could a perfect man be able to fall?
All right. I have only to add one trifling question. How could a perfect man be unable to fall? Is it not evident that a perfect man ought to have power, courage, endurance, self-control, discrimination, and such things? And is it not obvious that he would not, or move towards temptations, must be able to fall?
Watch your step there. Go ahead, please. I'm not even sure we want to hear that. You can ask a question, one question only, and then go sit down. You got that?
I wonder what Chesterton would do if he were made a dictator.
The truth is, and I apologize for my egotism or for mentioning any matters of a delicate personal nature, but the truth is that I am a dictator. You see, every day I dictate to a very efficient lady who is kind enough to take down my remarks on a typewriter. But when I consider how hard I find it, even with such assistance, to get through all my work and attend to all my business, and how even at the best errors can still occur, I wonder whether any dictator can really be so directly efficient or universally exact as is sometimes suggested, merely because he is dictating to 20 stenographers and dealing with 10,000 things at once.
Thank you. Next question from the audience, please.
But I didn't get to ask my question.
Mr. Chesterton just answered your question.
But that wasn't my question. I was just wondering out loud what Chesterton would do if he were a dictator, and then he answered out loud.
What's your question?
It's pretty basic, Mr. Chesterton. I'd like to hear you explain what's the difference between work and play.
Work is doing what you do not like. A play is doing what you like. The whole point of work is law. But the whole point of play is liberty. There should be hours of labor, and they should be laborious. And there should be hours of freedom, and they should be free.
All right, we finally have another email. From another country even. Dear Mr. Chesterton, you write about art and morality, but I think you can no longer maintain your arguments. The time has come where we are done with all moral judgment of art as art. The artist's only moral duty as an artist is to be true to his art and to express his vision of reality as well as he can. Pablo in Madrid. Mr. Chesterton.
I saw that sentence when I was 16 years old. I saw through it when I was 18 years old. What is the meaning of moral judgment? Either it means nothing at all, or it means a general judgment about the social effect of men's actions upon each other. There must be some effect of artistic action, as of all other action. If there is, it can be morally judged, apart from any judgment when it is artistically judged.
Well, that takes care of Pablo. And we have another phone call. Hello, you're on Ask Mr. Chesterton. Where are you calling from?
Barrington, Illinois.
Outside of Chicago?
Yes.
Yeah, you see, I know where Barrington, Illinois is. It's, okay, what's your question for Mr. Chesterton?
Mr. Chesterton, what do you think of modern representative government?
Representative government has many disadvantages, one of them being that it is never representative. The modern representative not only does not represent his constituents, he does not even represent himself.
And here's another question from the studio audience.
Mr. Chesterton, what do you think our age will be known as?
The Muddle Ages.
Maybe I should have asked, what do you think our historians will recognize as the chief characteristic of the modern age?
Historians will probably mark the present epoch by the problem of traffic, unless indeed the historians have all been killed by the traffic before they can write any histories of it.
Okay, good. And I think here's another email. This is from Mitch in Dallas. Mr. Chesterton, it seems like miracles are seldom, if ever, performed in public. How can we be sure they really happened?
Murders are seldom, if ever, performed in public, and yet we seem to be able to find enough evidence that they happened.
Very good. It looks like we have only time for one more question. The young lady in the studio audience, what's your question for Mr. Chesterton?
Mr. Chesterton, I really enjoy your writing, but when I tell others about your books, they always say you're too paradoxical. It's not that they're attacking you, they're just dismissing you, saying your attacks are simply idle paradoxes, and so they don't take you seriously. I'm wondering if you could tell me how I should respond to that criticism?
Finally, an intelligent question. Mr. Chesterton.
When next you hear some attack called an idle paradox, ask after the dox. Ask how long the dox has been in the world. How many nations or centuries have believed in the dox? How often the dox has proved itself right in practice? How often thoughtful men have returned to the dox in theory? Pursue the dox. Persecute the dox. In short, ask the dox whether it is orthodox.
Ask the docs whether it is orthodox. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chesterton. Thank you, studio audience. Thank you, everyone else. Do you have a question for Mr. Chesterton? If you do, there's even a better way to ask it than trying to ask it on this program. Join the American Chesterton Society. This will entitle you to receive Gilbert Magazine, which is the best magazine in the world. Each issue has a section called Chesterton's Mailbag. You'll get to ask your questions, and you'll get Chesterton's answers in his own words, his amazing, prophetic, timely answers to all of today's questions. I'm Dale Ahlquist. Please join us again on the Apostle of Common Sense, and please support the American Chesterton Society.
the Holy Rosary with Mother